If you turn your Bibles to Luke chapter 2, where we will begin. Every year, one of the things that as a ministry you struggle with is what to preach on Christmas. Because there's only so many verses of Scripture that are there, and as I began to pray last Sunday night about what I wanted to share with you today, the one word that kept coming back into my heart and mind was the word unique. Unique, one of a kind. And in fact, in John 3:16, when the Bible says that God gave his only begotten Son, the word there means one of a kind, that he is unique. And as we look at Christmas, we see a lot of people that celebrate Christmas in different ways, and a couple of them that I failed to mention in the announcement is Robin and Mark Husted are having an open house Saturday, beginning at 5 o'clock Saturday and going through to Christmas Day. And that, yeah, okay. No, I'm just kidding. But if you're, there's a flyer on the bulletin board if you'd like to go out and share for a little while. They would be glad to have you come and share with them. But we have to look at our own way of dealing with Christmas, the only way that we celebrate Christmas. And I know we've heard all the talk about putting Christ back into Christmas and things like that. But I want to look about who he is, basically. A lot more people celebrate Christmas than they do Easter. And I have come to believe that's because a baby doesn't threaten us. A resurrected Savior does. Therefore, we tend not to celebrate so much, but you can't take him as a baby without taking him as a resurrected Lord. That there is no separation between that. The other thing I want to share with you is you can't take Jesus and leave his message out. And there seems to be a lot of people just, we don't have any doctrine at our church. Well, you better, because the message that Christ left for us, okay? There was a man that was trying to buy a Christmas present for his wife, and she wanted a four-wheel drive Jeep vehicle of some kind. And on Christmas morning, he gave her this beautiful diamond ring. And his neighbor said, well, didn't she want a four-wheel drive Jeep vehicle of some kind? And he said, yes. What'd you get her? I got her a diamond ring. Why didn't you get her the Jeep? He says, where am I going to find a fake Jeep? I have on the screen two $20 bills. The problem is the one on the top is real, the one on the bottom is counterfeit. We might celebrate Christmas. And I won't get into this too much, but you've heard me share this before, that one of the greatest concerns that I have is the fact that we worship a God that we have created in our own minds. A God that is not holy as he really is. It's a God that is satisfied with our half-hearted, half-loyal devotion to him. A God who is satisfied with just being religious. Well, here this $20 bill, it's hard to tell the difference, but there is a great difference because the counterfeit 20 is of no value whatsoever, correct? In fact, it's worth probably about 20 years of your life if you get caught. Okay? There's a passage in the Gospel of Luke where the people come to Jesus and Jesus says, depart from me, you workers of evil. I never knew you. But Lord, didn't we cast out demons and work miracles in your name? And he still says, I never knew you. Depart from me. There's a big difference between being religious and being Christian. And the difference comes down to accepting the true identity of Jesus. And that's what I want to look at today, not only his birth, and what we're going to see, everything about the life of Jesus was unique. Okay, that's one thing that I want you to understand. No matter what you might think of Jesus, there has never been anybody in the history of the world quite like this man. So what is there that is so unique about him? And the first thing that we want to look at is that his birth was unique. Okay? His birth was unique. I had a little exercise downstairs with the kids, had a skein of yarn, And we had Old Testament prophecy and New Testament fulfillment, and we would throw the yarn to the person that just read, wrap around our wrist, and keep going back and forth with it. Now, one of the greatest things that it accomplished was all the kids were tied up down there. No, I'm just kidding. But what it accomplished is the fact that all of this came together. This wasn't just some kind of thought from God, that right from the very beginning, you realize the first promise of Jesus coming was in Genesis 3:15 in the Garden of Eden. Right after Adam and Eve had sinned, right then, God promised them the seed of the woman would come and destroy Satan. Speaking of Jesus. So this is Ephesians and 1 Peter tell us that this was planned before the creation of the world, that Jesus was going to come and he was going to live and die and resurrect from the dead, ascend to heaven. So his birth was certainly unique. And one great point is the fact that he was born of a virgin. And in our world of science, and we just cannot quite comprehend that. I remember a conversation I had with a man, and that's all it was about. A virgin can't have a baby. However, if God is your starting point, what is there that is impossible with God? So we see that he is born. I know our calendar is divided at 0, and BC stands for what? Before Christ, AD, in the year of our Lord, Anno Domini, means the year of our Lord, and that's where we split our calendar. But we will see that as we study out that Jesus was born about 3 or 4 BC, according to our calendar, that all these prophecies were given about him, that he is born here in Bethlehem, which is not the place you would think. You know, if you were going to do something religious in a big way, Jerusalem would be the city. That's why the wise men, the Magi, end up coming to Jerusalem. If he's born King of the Jews, then Jerusalem is where he would be born at. But found out it was this little town of Bethlehem. Okay? Its claim to fame up to this point was the birth of what other famous person? David. Okay? It means, in all things, the word Bethlehem means the house of bread. And here comes the bread of life that is born in this small little hamlet here outside of Jerusalem. The wise, powerful people of the world knew nothing about it. And it was these lowly shepherds that he would announce that time. There was a little boy that was with his mom in the mall, and they were doing the last-minute shopping, and she was just in such a big hurry to get back home and everything. And about halfway through her shopping, she realized that her little boy wasn't with her. So she retraces her steps, she goes back, and here he is just completely engrossed in this nativity scene. And he turns to his mom and says, "Look, Mom, it's the baby Jesus being born." And she grabs him by the arm, jerks him away, and says, "We don't have time for that. Can't you see I'm trying to get ready for Christmas?" Too many times we find ourselves in that kind of situation. That what's the old saying, trying to make the main thing, we miss the point. And I think that's why so many times our Christmases are disappointing. There's a climax to them for a short period of time, and then it kind of fades away from us. Someone once said, "Joe, when do you actually celebrate Christmas?" And I said, as a Christian, I ought to be doing that every day. That we celebrate his birth. And it's not just one day. You know, I had a gentleman tell me one time, he said, "You don't know that Jesus was born on December the 25th? And I said, "You don't know that he wasn't." I don't know when he was born, but the fact is what, folks? He was born. He came into this world. He lived in this world. His birth was unique. The next thing that we see, his life was unique. His whole life, everything about it. And don't get me going too much on this, because this is something that really keeps me motivated as I see the life of this man and how different it was from everyone else. But if God became a human and lived in this world, don't you think he'd have a unique birth? Don't you think he would have a unique life? And that's what we see in the person of Jesus. In the Sermon on the Mount, you read the Sermon on the Mount, how many times Jesus says, "You have been told," or "You have heard, but I say to you." Now, that is a revolutionary statement, because what he says, here's what the Old Testament says. Who wrote the Old Testament? Who's the author of the Old Testament? God. But Jesus said, "But I say to you." He is claiming that authority, that this is just not some Buddha or some Muhammad or some Confucius giving us some kind of philosophy. he says, I say to you, I'm the authority. And we'll see that in Matthew 17 at the Transfiguration. That here is Elijah and Moses representing the law and the prophets of the Old Testament. And what does God say about Jesus? This is my son, whom I'm well pleased. Listen to him. That he is claiming that his authority supersedes that of the Old Testament. Can an ordinary guy say that? Well, he can, but he'd be lying. There's a time that the high priest sends the soldiers out from the temple to arrest Jesus. And they come back empty-handed. And I think one of the greatest statements in Scripture, you know what they say to the high priest? Never has a man spoken like this man speaks. They got so caught up in what Jesus was saying, they forgot what they went out there for. That in the words that he spoke, the life that he led, cannot be matched by anybody, by anything. That his words are unequal. His works are unforgettable. You share with me, what are some of the favorite miracles that Jesus performed that you enjoy in the Bible? Anybody? Loudly so I can hear. Joanne. Pardon me? Raising of Lazarus. Would you like to have been there? Okay. If you were Mary and Martha, what would you have thought? Okay. One of the things that I want to share with you too, I try to get across in Bible studies and every time I speak or preach or teach, is that these are flesh and blood people we're talking about. These are not just stories. And you have to, if you're going to enjoy what these stories are really about, folks, you've got to put yourself in the place of these people. What would you have thought if you were Mary and Martha? He's been dead 4 days. The body is decaying. And at the word of Jesus, what happened? He's alive. He walks out. And that make you take a second look at this Jesus? Wouldn't he just pretty much change everything that you begin to think about? Here's this Jesus that Mary and Martha thought had let them down because he didn't heal their brother, and here he is alive again? Doesn't that kind of get your blood pumping, folks? If not, check and see if it's still beating. Okay? What's another miracle that you enjoy? Blind man. Okay? John chapter 9, and other places too. But you realize that was one of the signs of the Messiah, was the healing of the blind. That had never happened at any other time, and that was one of those distinct signs that this person was the Messiah. Can you imagine never being able to see, and one day you can see your family for the first time ever? Unbelievable, isn't it? All that the Lord is doing is Jesus. Anybody else? Casting out the demons. Nobody has shown that kind of authority. You know, when we look at the miracles of Jesus, we see that they are over illness, they are over injury, they are over creation, they are over life and death itself. That he performed all these miracles over all areas of our life. You know, there's a few that I thought of that you have already taken care of. The man that is lame at the pool in John chapter 5, that Jesus comes up and heals him. Jairus' daughter, the feeding of the 5,000. You know, that's one of those that always sticks in my mind, because the 5,000 people, plus women and children, it says, may not have been aware of where this bread and this fish was coming from, but those 12 disciples, that's what sticks in my mind. Every time that Jesus gave them this and they came back, the result was what? There was more. Now, if you were one of those 12 guys that were very close, wouldn't that make you stop and think twice about this Jesus? Exactly who is this man? And that shows his power over creation. That's where all this came from. He created it. He created it and tells us something about who this man really is. What about the walking on the water? That he shows his authority over nature. And of course, the one that Joanne messed everything up for me. Raising of Lazarus. I don't know what it would have been like to be there, to watch this happen. And if we sit quietly and silently with no response, when's the last time you saw someone raised from the dead? Anybody? Wow. Okay. And only superseded by his own resurrection. that not only does Jesus have power over Lazarus' life, he has the power over his own. I have the power, he said, to lay my life down and to pick it up again. Showing that he's completely independent of all the authority and power that he has. And that's the next thing we're going to look at is his power was unlimited. His power, unlimited. We see in John 1 where he's called the Word, and we say a word is just a word, but in the original language, this means much more. That according to the Greeks and to the Jews, the Word was some kind of active force. That was the very expression of God. It wasn't just word. It meant so much more to what Jesus was all about. He was the greatest man that ever lived. Greatest man that ever lived. And no one can even question that at all. Colossians chapter 1, I don't know if I put those verses, we're not going to read them right now, but they are verses that tell us that he is completely supreme, that he was God in the flesh, that the fullness of God dwelled in him. In Hebrews chapter 1, it's going to tell us that he was the exact representation of the Father. Jesus himself is going to say the Father and I are one. And we can go deeper and deeper into that at another time. But his power is just unbelievable. His holiness was untouchable. The cleansing of the temple showed that. But in 1 Peter, Peter says that he was without sin. As far as Hebrews 4:15 says that he sympathized, that he experienced everything that we experience, yet without sin. In John chapter 6, he will stand before the Jews and say, which one of you will convict me of one sin? That he was perfect. His holiness was absolutely perfect. His impact upon the world was unparalleled. He changed everything there is about our world and about the history of our world. It was never the same after he came. We talked about the date. That date is based upon whom? Jesus. That the dividing of history, even if you reject who he is, the date that you use right now is based upon his life, upon his birth. If you want to study the history of the world, folks, music, the first inspiration of music was Christian music, architecture, art, statues, all this stuff, all this came as a response to who Jesus really is. You've heard of the Dark Ages? You know what caused the Dark Ages? The church did not allow the people to have the Bible. And following the Dark Ages is what we know as the Renaissance, the reawakening. There was a man named Gutenberg that invented the movable print press. And Bibles were put out, and that was where all of this came forward. And all the influence that Jesus has, the impact upon his world, we cannot describe all of that. Every year we get into this phrase, war on Christmas. It's not war on Christmas, it's war on Christ. That's what the world is trying to do, and it always has been. It always has been. I remember the story about the demon that came up to Satan and says, Merry Christmas, Satan. And Satan said, we better keep it merry and playful, because if people get serious about it, we're in trouble. If they really get serious about who this Jesus is, then we're really in trouble. His impact is unbelievable. There was a church that was putting together a nativity scene, and it was supposed to be Bethlehem, and they couldn't find the star to put up on the top of the nativity scene until a little boy came running in with the baby Jesus. He said, here's the star of Bethlehem. And not only is he a star of Bethlehem, he is the star of the whole world. And as we see the discussions and disagreements over all kinds of things, who does it always come down to? Him. Him. I have come to realize that everything comes down to his true identity that we're going to get to here in just a moment. His uncompromising truthfulness. We know in John 3 that as he spoke to Nicodemus, we know about the woman at the well, and I think that's always so interestingly connected, because he calls Nicodemus the teacher of Israel. He might have been the top religious teacher of all Israel, and he doesn't understand what Jesus is saying. And Jesus says, I've come here for you. The woman at the well would be at the bottom of that ladder, socially, politically, religiously. and yet he shows the same concern for her that he did for Nicodemus. The Pharisees, the religious leaders of the day, he didn't compromise a thing, did he? He spoke the truth to him because his truth is uncompromising. But what about his love also? The woman that was taken in adultery. The great love and grace and mercy that he showed to her. He calls the people in Mark 12 sheep without a shepherd. They have no one to guide them. And he has a lot of compassion and love for what they're going through. John 3:16, for God did what? So loved the world. And I think I've shared this with you. I'm sure I have. And with the young people downstairs, take the word world out of there and put your name there. And it still rings true that he so loved you that he gave. The word gave speaks of sacrifice. There's a technical word for sacrifice. His unique son. His identity is undeniable. In the Bible, Jesus continues to make those absolute, unique statements about himself. That in the Gospel of John, he makes 7 of those statements. We call them I ams of Christ. Big importance there that maybe we really can't go into at this time. But the word I am is the same name that God tells Moses to call him by at the burning bush. I am. Let's see the children, the love that he had for his children, the way that they were attracted to him. John chapter 6, he says, I am the bread of life. Okay? John chapter 8, I am the light of the world. John chapter 10, I am the gate or the door. He also says in John chapter 10, I am the good shepherd. In chapter 11, he says, I am the resurrection and the life. In chapter 14, he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. In John 15, he says, I am the true vine. He just goes on, making those statements about himself. In John 14, after making the statement, I am the way, the truth, and the life, he says to the disciples, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Now, if that's a lie, that's an outlandish lie. But if it's true, maybe we need to change the way we celebrate Christmas. Maybe we need to make a change about who this person really is and how we know who he is. That he is 100% human, he is 100% God. And he has made the invisible God visible for us. We are involved in our society today in an ism called pluralism. Anybody have a definition for pluralism? That all religions are okay. There are many different ways to God. We don't really have to worry too much about it. That as long as we believe in something, everything's going to be okay. The problem with that is that Christ makes all that a lie. He causes all that to be invalid. I, he says, am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. Maybe we need to rethink what we really believe about this man, Jesus. Maybe we have treated him too lightly, not understanding exactly the import of who he is and what he possesses and the power that he has. Let's go on very quickly here. His death was unique. The method of his death was prophesied 1,000 years before he died. In Isaiah chapter 52 and 53, written 750 years before Jesus came to earth, of how he would die. The severity of his suffering. If you want to get into a study of what Jesus went through, I remember when the Passion of the Christ came out and they rated R because of the torture that Jesus went through before he was crucified in that movie. And folks, if you want to study out what the scriptures teach, what you see on that movie is nothing compared to what he went through. He went through more suffering than any other person has ever gone through in the history of the world. By his stripe, you are healed. In Isaiah, one stripe. He was so obliterated, he said that people would not be able to recognize who it was by the time he went to the cross. His death is so unique. When he dies upon the cross, the events that are surrounding there, for 3 hours it appears anyway, that there's darkness over the earth. Now we say, well, it got cloudy or something. Luke is very specific. He says the sun refused to shine. That in the darkest moments of the history of the world, sinful man is putting the Son of God to death. And God could not look upon that. And there was darkness all around us. The 7 sayings of Jesus that we remember and all the things that dealt with. The one I want to share with you is found in John 19 when he says, "It is finished." That is not a cry of defeat. That is not the cry of the end of his life. That was a cry of victory. There was one word there. Teleos. It means we've reached the goal. It was a cry of victory that he had come for what reason? He came to die. And he has completed what God has set forth him to do. And because of that, he cries out. The splitting of the veil, okay, which is an interesting thing of its own as far as the Old Testament is concerned. It was a veil that kept man from going into the Holy of Holies, where only God and the high priest could be. And that veil is split, signifying that all people now can come to God. That there is no covering, there is no barrier between God and men, because it was the physical body of Jesus that was that veil that has been split now. And all people can come. His resurrection was unique. The appearances that he made after his resurrection, the disciples that he dealt with didn't go forward. Okay? But my favorite picture I thought was this one. Who's that? Any idea? Thomas. You get an A minus. I don't give straight A's, but you know A minus. Thomas. That when Jesus, he wasn't there when he appeared to the disciples, and he said he wouldn't believe until he could put his finger in the nail prints, his hand in his side. And the next Sunday night, I think it's interesting that God let him stew over this for 8 days. And the next Sunday night, he comes. And he appears before Thomas. And Thomas only has 5 words to say to Jesus. 5 words that we need to be saying to Jesus. What did he say? My Lord and my God. That's all he said, folks, because there wasn't anything else left to say. And I think that if we understand and we continue to grab hold of who Jesus is and realize that Christianity rests and falls upon the resurrection of Christ. One of the chapters in the book we're studying on our discipleship class is going to deal only with the resurrection of Jesus and the proof that is there, the historical fact. But there's one other thing here that we need to talk about very quickly before we finish this, is that his return is going to be unique. That the world is heading toward a final judgment. Very quickly, it seems like to me. That Jesus is going to return as judge. He's going to return as king. And we will realize that through his ministry that heaven and hell are real. And where I spend my eternity is all based upon my relationship to him. Not how many Sundays I come to church. Not how long I've been a member of Centennial Christian Church. But my eternity will rest upon my relationship to him. If that's true, have we honored him as we should have? Have we paid that homage to him? Have we shown the reverence to him that we should have? You remember, now I can't remember the name, Tool Time. What is the title of that show? Not All in the Family. Home Improvement. Who was that? You get an A minus too. Gotcha. Home Improvement. Tim Taylor, and that's a whole other story, but they were at a Christmas play, and his kids were in the Christmas play, and they had cardboard letters that they were supposed to hand pulled up, and they got it backwards. Instead of saying Noel, it said Leon. And Al Borland, Tim's partner, leans over to Tim's wife and says, "Who's Leon?" Well, they had it backwards. And I would suggest to you that maybe Christmas in our world today is backwards. And we're looking at it completely in a different way. I'm not concerned about how the world celebrates Christmas. I just need to be concerned about how I do. The pagans and heathens are going to do what they're going to do. But as a Christian, how am I going to celebrate Christmas? It is not about how many presents that I can buy or getting exactly the right thing for everyone. I've learned with children especially that all they want for Christmas is you. Your time, your attention. Why else would you spend $300 for a gift and they're playing with a Scotch tape dispenser instead of the gift? That's what they want. And all that Jesus wants is us. But you see, the truth is that, and I certainly believe this, that the true identity of Jesus is the biggest stumbling block to not only the people outside the church, but it's a stumbling block to the people in the church. We don't take him for who he is. We've missed the point here somehow along the line, because if we did, we'd live differently than we live. If I knew that my whole life, from beginning through all eternity, rested on whether I was a friend to this man or not, I think that I would treat him a little differently than I do. That I would be a lot more concerned. His birth has never been duplicated in human history. His life has never been duplicated in human history. His ministry, his death, his resurrection has never been duplicated. Boy, is he unique. Is he unique. And his second coming will never be duplicated in human history. This story kept ringing back in my mind, and I'd like to close with this. There was a group of high school students that were a part of this particular Christian church. And it was near Christmas time, and they were going to go door to door and just talk to people about their relationship to Jesus. And just a couple doors down from the church where they attended was this older gentleman, lived by himself, and everybody in town knew that he was of the Jewish faith. So they thought, there's no sense in going there. He doesn't believe in Jesus at all. But then they decided, we agreed to go to every household. So let's go. And there was 3 or 4 of them walked up to the house, knocked on the door. He greeted them, invited them into his house. And he sat there very, very quietly, very attentively, as they, for the next 20 minutes, talked to them about the birth of Jesus and his life and his death, his resurrection, just pretty much what I've shared with you. And when they got done, he looked at them. And you know what he said? Young people, if 10% of what you just told me is true, you should be 10 times more excited than you are. If what the Bible teaches us about Jesus is true, we as his church ought to be a whole lot more excited than we appear to be. That all eternity rests upon this man. And I believe that it is time for us to spend some time to think about who this man really is. Who he really is, not by who we think or what we've been taught or what we believe, but what this book says about him. And after 30 years of preaching, I am still awed by this Jesus. I am still overwhelmed at times about his wisdom, his power, his love, his holiness, all that together. And why in the world would a man that is as perfect as Jesus care at all about a sinful man like me? But the story of Christmas is he does. So much that he would die for me and for you. Our hymn of invitation this morning is, "O come, all ye faithful." And that's what we need to do. Before we can ever think about the world believing in Jesus, the church is going to have to. That we're going to have to be enthused and excited about the faith that we have to influence the world that is around us. Let's stand together. We sing the